Thinking.
Live streaming is on.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, night, whatever the time it is when you watch this. If you watch it live or you watch it non-live, we're here with my dear friend, amazing writer, legend to the stars, the great Jeff Jones. Really early morning for him, so you gotta thank him, especially for being him. Hey, Jeff, how are you, my
Hey
friend?
man, how are you? Not too early. I also like that non-live, that term, live or non-live.
Well, we could say zombie-like, but you look much better than a zombie. So let's keep it that way. So, how are you? How's things around your area? How's life?
Life. I mean, look, everybody's dealing with so much, so I can't complain about anything. Everybody's healthy and working and doing fine. So we're all good. We're all good. It's nice to have a distraction and talk about comic books and the process of stories and writing, and so I'm happy to do this. Very
Oh
happy.
yes, we're going to get into that. But first thing, what is the thing you miss the most with this crazy thing, apocalypse, whatever we're gonna call it? Or as
Uh,
Chapin said, they won the most boring apocalypse in the history of apocalypses because we don't have red rain coming from the clouds, zombies. You just get out and say, as he said, you open the door and oh, you're dead. So so
yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I most of what I miss is just people, like because although I'm an introvert and an extrovert, so that's why I'm a writer. So I like writing and I like being by myself, and I think like most comic fans, I can be by myself all day and be totally fine. But I also do like people a lot, and I like working with people. I like seeing people, and like I like Zooms and things like I've gotten used to those, but I miss people. I miss just seeing people like my friends and
Mhm.
other family members and stuff.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, people keeps asking me the same question, and I'm like, it's not that that I miss the convention itself, but what I mean is
Right.
to hang out with people. And by the end of the day,
Yeah.
one of those dinners where we all get together, you expect the same guys all over again, but suddenly you see somebody that you haven't seen in like 3 years, and you're like, oh my god. And that, for me,
Yeah.
that's what makes it special when you find that person that you haven't talked in years, and you get to spend 15 minutes just talking about life
Yeah.
and how you meet
Yes.
in each other.
Yes. I agree with you. It's been hard. I've done a lot of like Zoom drinks and hanging out with friends through Zoom. The Dio and I have a regular drink over Zoom, which is it's just fun to talk about comics.
Hey, but by the way, why comics? I mean, you have the chance to. You come from the movie industry too. Why did you decide that? What made you say, "What I want to do is to write comics"? It was your heart, like pushing you in that direction. It was
Yeah.
what was it?
Yeah. I mean, I grew. It started when I was really really young. I watched and saw superheroes on TV and animation when I was a kid, like everybody else. Superman, the movie, the Super Friends cartoon show, toys. You just grew up with that stuff around you. It was part of everything else. And ultimately, I remember, I don't know how old I was, but I remember going to the drugstore and seeing a Justice League comic. It was like issue 242 or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, they make magazines of these characters. Like, I didn't really know what comic books were. And it was the first time I saw a comic book. And then I was at my grandmother's house in Detroit. My brother and I found a box of my uncle's old comics from the 60s up in the attic. And they had all the DC had the checkerboard across them. And I thought that was so like, I'm like, oh my God, these, and all the ones with checkerboards I got into, they were cool. Flash, Superman, Justice League, Metamorpho. Like I loved all those characters, and that really kicked off a love for comic books. And when I moved from Detroit to this town called Clarkston one year, my brother and I didn't know anybody in town, so we ended up reading comics and getting into that all summer, and then ultimately I love drawing, and I wanted to draw comics originally.
Mm.
So I've just had a love for comic books and the characters and the medium and their adventures and following their history and going back and forward. I just love, it's just my first passion. I always say it's my first passion is comic books, and I love comic books. I love the characters. I'm really grateful to have spent most of my career working with them.
Mm-hmm.
I just love them. I just like the spirit of them. I don't know what it is. It's just, sometimes I think, you get bit by the comic book bug and you just find it.
Yeah, and the bug never leaves you. Even if you want,
It doesn't. It's a
if
life.
you want to escape, you just can't. The bug is going to
Yeah,
chase you back.
exactly.
Uh,
So yeah, comic books. It's just a love for them I've had forever. That's all.
and as you just said, it started with DC. So it started with DC characters originally.
Yeah, originally it was DC characters. I got into all the Image characters like Spawn and Savage Dragon, when I was younger, when I was a kid. Got into Marvel, like Hulk. I loved Hulk, Captain America, the Avengers, X-Men. I mean, I got into all of it, but my majority of my collection was DC because my favorite characters like Flash, Superboy, the Connor Kent Superboy, JSA, I got into big time. Like those are when I was a kid, those are like my favorites.
Mm-hmm. When you write, have you had a lot of very close collaborators that you've repeated work many times, that you work with many times? For example, the most obvious example right now is Gary, of course.
Yeah.
Hey Gary, amazing friend and one of the most amazing guys ever. I think you'll agree.
Ever. Yes.
And Gary, I always ask the same question to some artists and to some writers. And in your case, it's especially obvious to me that you write for your artists. There's some writers, as you will know, perfectly know, that don't write to the artist; they just write. But you, Mark Wade, probably all the guys you've worked along so well during the years. Raka was telling me the same thing last week. If I didn't write for my artist, I wouldn't be able to write.
Yeah. I mean, I can't write. I don't know how anyone can write without knowing who's drawing something. It's impossible for me. Like, Greg, Mark Wade, Jeff Loeb definitely does. I don't know how anyone can't write knowing their artist, and then like not only that, but I don't know how anyone can write a comic and not talk to their artist. Like, there's a lot of things where I'm like, they've never talked to their writer about a story. I'm like, well, how do you guys know what the goal is and the tone and the, why you're telling the story? I don't want to just tell a, Flash number 755 to tell it. Like, what am I, why am I telling this story? What's the point of this story? Even from I did a short story with Scott Collins on Captain Cold recently in the Flash. And it was like talking to Scott 8 pages. And I talked to Scott, 5 times about it. This is a story that it's all about misunderstanding, and it's all about projection, and it's all about a guy that's just trying to get beer to watch a hockey game and then gets caught up in a huge thing and is misinterpreted as a supervillain on the attack. But it's an example of how Captain Cold is completely misunderstood by the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that little story requires a lot of conversation and a lot of discussion. And I've worked with Scott for 20 years. And so he and I have a great working relationship, and it's very easy to, write for him and to talk to him about what it is. But, with someone like Gary Frank, who I've worked with since 2005 consistently, I write specifically for him. And it's what he's best at is emotion. He's great at emotion. He's an amazing storyteller, an amazing draftsman, an amazing, illustrator, and he's brilliant. Like, talking about story, he's brilliant. So we always talk about, even on anything we've done, why we're telling the story, what the tone is. But I have to write for him, and it's not just about panel count. They can do 10 panels like George Perez, or they want to do widescreen like Ed McGuinness. It's really about, the kinds of stories you're telling. You can get, are they more emotional? Are they more robust? Are they mysterious? Are they dark? Are they what are they? So it's about so many different things when you're working with an artist. And every one of my stories is tailored to the artist. And I talk to the artist. We have conversations about it. I pitch it back and forth. We shape it together because we're creating it together. And that's how you both get invested in that story. You both want to make whatever you're working on. People always ask me, what's your favorite character to write? And I say, and it's true, whatever I'm writing. There are characters that I slip into easily, like Hal Jordan, but there are other characters, whatever is in front of me, I end up loving because I'm in it. I'm so passionate about it. But yeah, right. Like I tend to work with the same artists like Gary Frank or Jason Fabach, or Ivan Reis over and over, because you end up having a great collaboration. You figure it out. Like I got to work with Dialogos on JSA and Shazam, and that wasn't an accident. It was like, he has this kind of superheroes meets Norman Rockwell quality that I find, that I love, like this very warm, heart-driven, classic Americana superhero tangibility to it, and there's a fun to his work. So it plays more to like a JSA or a Shazam. It feels like it's got this cool historic piece to his artwork, and so everybody, and he's like, I think he's like amazing when the panels are like nice and wide, and you give him the space to really show the emotion. But yeah, I tailor all my scripts to everyone I work with. You have to, and once you find a good collaborator, it's so special. You can't take it for granted. Like, I mean, I'm so grateful for Gary Frank and Jay and everybody I work with, because it finding that like kind of magic. I think you can talk to any writer who works with the same artist over and over, and there is a magic, unquantifiable magic to that collaboration, and it's fun. When you produce things that everything I look at on my bookshelf, the things I've done with the artists I've worked with consistently, those are the things I'm most proud of. And you have most fun.
Yeah, but what when you're writing a character, what is the core? And I mean, the core is the heart, the emotion, or the core of the character for you is how they think.
It's the heart. It's the heart, and it's really like what motivates them. What are they about? Like with Aquaman, when Ivan and Joe and I did Aquaman, it's really specific because I take a step back when I look at the characters, and it's not about like we were talking even earlier. It's not about like okay, I kind of look at the character holistically as the whole. As the whole publishing, like as if that's their life, and they have very different interpretations, and I need to find one that my heart hooks into emotionally, so I can write from some place that I care about. Because I already love Aquaman. I think he's cool. Like that stuff is easy. It's the heart of like, what's this guy about? What's he feeling? And what's his world about? And with Aquaman as an example, I'm like, well, his father's a lighthouse keeper, his mother's the queen of Atlantis, which is, and by the way, there's a couple different versions of him, but that's the one that I hook into, because I suddenly find like he's a man of two worlds, of two cultures. My dad's Lebanese, like, so my family on my dad's side is all Lebanese, and that's a different culture than my mom's side. And so I could relate to kind of like, it's being of two cultures. But Arthur's that to the extreme where he's not really accepted on land, and I'll get into that in a second, and he's not accepted by Atlantis in my mind. Like, it was more interesting if he didn't feel like he belonged to either one. Absolutely. And then his journey would be like, he realizes he's the bridge. He has to be the bridge between both, right? And bring them together and find peace. And it's a long journey, but it was a journey. I'm like, if I have that, I can write the book for 100 issues or 25 issues or whatever. But once I lock into that, everything else falls into place for me very quickly. So in the terms of like land, I remember I'm like, well, everyone makes fun of Aquaman. They think he's a joke, like outside of comics. So let's have a little bit of that happen in reality. Like have him deal with a little bit of ridicule. Like he's the one he's like, like if you're listing your most favorite Justice League members, he's the last one. And that's what he kind of gets. And to both have fun, but also like acknowledge that's how a lot of people feel coming into reading an Aquaman comic. So rather than trying to make him super, super cool and extremely cool, like edgy in like 1995 Image Comics, it was like, let's just put a veneer of that on, but keep him classic. And then on the other side with Atlantis, I thought, well, let's make Atlantis more dangerous. Let's make it a place where Ocean Master, who's been both human and Atlantean in the comics, let's make him Atlantean, and the king, and like, let's make it a more vicious, dark place, so that ultimately I had these great two places where if he was in Atlantis, he could be imprisoned or killed, and if he's on land, he's kind of ridiculed, or he's at least the very least, he's not worshipped, and so suddenly he's got no place to go that's safe except this lighthouse, right?
Mhm.
And ultimately his story was about bringing the worlds together. So that's, but I always try and lead with that. What's the heart of it? Why do you care?
Yeah, of course, in a big way, and you succeeded in issue 1, and we'll go back to that. We were talking about even before we started, guys. It took you an issue to restore his dignity, and that gets us to formats, which is sometimes you need an issue, as in this case, which I think that it just one issue you told the world, this is Aquaman, he deserves your respect. We acknowledge he's been made fun of, but this is why he's cool in many ways. But in other ways, like in Green Lantern Rebirth or other, you chose to go with, okay, we need this amount of issues to get our story. What determined? I need to say it. I need to tell my principle for this one, for this character in one issue, or I need to do it in a large format series. Is it the research you need to do, or the details, or what is it?
It's for Green Lantern Rebirth, it's interesting because the mythology had been through so much. Hal was like Parallax and Spectre. Guy Gardner was, the Green Lantern Corps didn't exist. Guy Gardner was like the warrior at the time. There was a lot. If I just started with a Green Lantern #1 where Hal Jordan was Green Lantern and the Corps was with him, there was probably a lot of the fan base that would have just rejected that, right? Mm-hmm. Because we hit the reboot button. I'm not a big fan of that. Whereas with Green Lantern Rebirth, it just took, okay, here's the story, 5 issues of what his journey is going to be and how he comes back and how the whole Corps comes back, and wrap it around a story about fear and get back to the core messaging, the core concept of Green Lantern, of overcoming fear and what that really means, like what it takes to be a Green Lantern. My favorite scene in that is when Green Arrow puts on the ring and barely can make an arrow. And he's super tired afterward. And he's like, is that like how hard it is to use the ring? And Kyle Rayner's like, yeah, every time. And he's like, geez, like it's like a big deal. And so it just all depends, In Aquaman 2, we did have like, he was dead and we brought him back in Blackest Night, and Mera was a big part of Blackest Night. Like I wanted to put Mera on center stage, and that was really to get focus back on those characters, knowing we were going to do Aquaman at a later time and doing Brightest Day. So there was kind of a preamble to Aquaman #1, but I think most people that got into that book didn't really look at the preamble. They really just read that comic book. It was New 52 and it was a fresh start, but all that stuff had kind of helped lead to that. So it all depends, though. Some things like DC Universe Rebirth, that was like a 60-some page book. And I really felt like, look, you got one shot. Like, it can't be a miniseries. You got one shot to just get it right, get things back, get the heart back into the DC Universe, and let it move forward, And by having Wally West, who's one of my very favorite characters in comics. Growing up, he was my favorite character. But having him, which represents so much, I think like Mark Waid's run on that character was brilliant. Like Mark, to me, he was like, when I was, growing up reading comics, he was my favorite writer. He and Grant Morrison and Mark did an amazing job on making Wally West the Flash, and it was a beautiful book. And so it felt like he was for him to be the anchor to that was the heart. So it was all about heart. DC Universe, the story is very, very, Rebirth is very clean. Just about someone trying to get home. Mm-hmm. Someone trying to get home and warm, and then ultimately being rescued. And that was all about putting the heart back into the DCU. So it all depends. Sometimes sometimes it's a bigger thing like DC Universe or Green Lantern Rebirth. Sometimes I think you can just do it in a single issue, and get people on board. Justice Society of America #1, Dale Eaglesham and I did. That was a single issue that, that got that book, took a book of JSA that was kind of selling here, and then Justice Society was here. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have any kind of preamble for that. We just launched the book, and Teen Titans #1, we talked about that too. It's like Teen Titans #1 was like, let's get back to basics. It's kids in a big T, right? That don't really know what they're doing. That was it.
Yeah.
And I was using one of my very favorite characters, Connor Kent, was kind of my anchor. Mm-hmm. And leaning into the idea of kids not knowing what path they're going to take, which is the most exciting thing to me.
Absolutely. How much do your characters argue back at you? And I mean, like, I want you to
Oh,
do
you mean when
I want you to do this, and then the character says, "No, no, that's not me. That's not my path." Correct. You gotta go
I
in a
don't
different direction.
I don't know if they argue like that with me. I don't. That's not really my process. They kind of speak to me. You know, I kind of like some characters are very easy to write, like Superman, you know, or Larfleeze. Like some characters are just like I know exactly how they're going to behave in any situation. So if I have a situation, or I want them to struggle with something, or I want them to experience and feel something, I put them in a situation that's going to help elicit that reaction or that emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't often have characters like say, don't do this. You know, in hindsight, sometimes you see like, oh, maybe that, you know, you always self-analyze your work and want to make be better and better and better. But in the case of comics, usually the characters speak to me about what they're doing and what they emotionally, what they need or what they're going to go through. It's, you know, I don't often have characters argue with me. I sometimes have characters like, don't forget about me when there's a lot of characters. I'm like, oh right, this character, yeah, it's because it's a big series like Blackest Night or something. But I don't often have the characters. They're more with me than kind of behind me or ahead of me. You know what I mean? If they were behind me, they might argue with me, and if they're ahead of me, they might be pulling me through, which sometimes they do.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how it works in my head.
Yeah, I get you. You suffer a lot less than Rocka then, because he was telling me how much they argued with him last week.
Yeah.
And he had to change the whole third arc of a novel because they just argued and said all the characters said you're going in the wrong direction, and he had a big crisis.
I've had that a couple times where I've written half a script and I throw the whole thing out. Like I'm like, oh, this is the wrong story, and it's not the characters arguing with me. It's like I can tell I'm not getting into it. I'm not getting my momentum.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't feel like I'm just like on a river. Like when I feel like I'm moving ahead naturally, it's easy. But sometimes it's, you know, it's when it stalls out. I know like there's been occasions when it's stalled out and I've like put the script aside because it's not the right script.
Yeah, when you're writing, by the way, you need absolute silence, or you need sounds around you like cacophony. How is the process in that way?
It depends. I can write anywhere. I can write in an airport. I can write, you know, at home. I can write at office. It really depends. My favorite kind of writing is being in a room with other people and plotting. Like that's my favorite because it's fun. But I can write anywhere. It can be loud. It can be quiet. It doesn't really matter. I prefer to just be kind of calm, like, you know, like just not deadly quiet, but just like a regular day. But I can write with, you know, with music or with people talking, or again, like, you know, in a busy place. It doesn't totally matter because I tend to zero in and focus, and once I get lost in the story, I get lost.
It's fun because sometimes I've gotten, you know, the absolute silence answer. Some people talks about, you know, music but without any lyrics to not get lost in the words, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And some people tells me they change the music depending on the kind of scene. Do you do that at all?
Yeah.
You know, like I need to tell a epic story, so I'm going to go to Lord of the Rings or something like that.
Yeah, there are times, not a lot, but there are times where I put on like a song or music and I've had it on repeat for. When I wrote this issue, Captain Cold, it was Flash 182, one of my favorite things I've done with Scott Collins. It was this spotlight issue. And I remember I put on a song and I played it I'd been wanting to write this issue for like months. I've been planning it. And I put on a song on repeat, no lyrics, but it was a song. It was a cool song. I had it on repeat the whole time. And I wrote that script in like, you know, one of the fastest I've ever written a script, like a day and a half. Usually it takes me a week, depending on the script. But yeah, occasionally that has happened. I haven't done it a ton.
Mm-hmm. Also, what's the most fun part for you? For example, when you're writing an epic scene, to go back to what I was saying before, or an intimate, you know, emotional scene, what is the part that made you enjoy it the most when you're tackling one of those scenes? The relationship between the characters, or you know, how to play with their emotions and get to a point from the struggle to the resolution in a way.
Yeah, I mean, the most fun. Geez, again, it all depends. Sometimes it's fun to write an action scene, a mystery scene, the emotional scene. I probably enjoy it the most when there's a heroic moment, like there was either through dialogue or action, when I feel like it's a really defining moment, for the character. I enjoy the humor. When there's humor, it's really fun. But I don't know, everything, even the villains. I really love writing villains. I find villains so compelling and interesting because they're relatable to me in a big way. But there's a few villains that like Joker, who I find I can't relate to. Like, he's scary to write, and I think that's pretty fascinating. Like, it's interesting to write a character where I'm like treading lightly because I don't want that character to even really realize I'm writing them, because it's so scary. Like, he's so irredeemable and so dark. Black Hand's the same way, but Black Hand to me is not as he's not as iconic, right? So he's not, you haven't seen him as much, but he was another character that was just, there wasn't anything redeemable I could find within him. He was so twisted and dark, and those characters are really fun to write because they're different. But I enjoy writing villains like Black Adam and Sinestro because they are so complicated. Captain Cold, I like villains who I relate to and I enjoy reading about. And a lot of the villains in comics aren't like villains in, film or television, because they're going to survive forever. Like, your stories never truly end. So you enjoy the characters a little more. In film and TV, you might really grow to despise the character and cheer when they're taken out. But it's different in comic books.
Yeah, in movies they tend to kill them by the end of the movie, so we don't get them back. But that's a fascinating point of view, which I was going to ask. What I love the most, in terms of Claremont's X-Men, to give you an example, or even in Marvin George's New Teen Titans, was the complexity of the villains. Like Terra or like Magneto in Chris's case, where you could feel like they're bad, they're villains, but in a way you related to them, to the conflict, to the struggle, which is what makes your villains so interesting. And that's what I was gonna ask. They're relatable, but in a way, how do you feel bad making them relatable, or do you think it's gotta be that way for the readers to understand that?
No, I never feel bad making them. Yeah, no, I never. I don't even think about, like, do I feel bad making the relatable? No, I actually love taking a character like Sinestro and making them complicated. I want you to love them and hate them and not be sure how you feel about them and root for them and then root against them. Like, to me, villains like Sinestro, like, you call him a villain and he is a villain, but you understand him and you connect with him, and it makes him more interesting to me. Like, you want a statue of Sinestro on your desk. That's cool because you understand who he is, even though he's a villain. But no, I think it's important making villains relatable and understandable, because then they're real.
Yeah.
Make them unrelatable, then there's a few characters where you're like, they're just fun to watch and they're scary to watch, like the Joker. I don't know how relatable the Joker is. I don't think he's that, in my mind, he's not that relatable, but he's fun to watch because he's so freaky and scary. But a lot of villains, super villains I see, like, if they're just two-dimensional, two-dimensional bad guys that just want to do bad to do bad, I don't have any interest in that. It just doesn't interest me at all.
In a way, we're talking about like Sinestro, as you just said, or Magneto, as I said before, is guys who actually believe they're heroes. I mean, they don't think they're villains at all. They think they're doing the right way, right?
And it's kind of a trope to say, oh, the villain always sees itself as the hero. Like, we hear that all the time. But the truth is, like, a character like Sinestro, he knows he's doing bad. But ultimately he believes it's for the right reasons. And I mean, that's interesting to see in a character, I think, to have the wherewithal. That same with Black Adam. His Black Adam's compass is a little different. Like, killing somebody to Black Adam that's hurting others, he doesn't have any guilt over it. He doesn't know why others would. Like, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's so final. And I think some of it is wish fulfillment in us too, is that, you know, we want to see the real bad guys get taken out. And when you have a bad guy taking out worse bad guys, then it becomes complicated.
Yeah.
You know, or he believes in protecting his people so much he'll do anything to do it. Well, you understand that.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that I love about DC, and we've talked about this too, is the generational aspect of the characters. You know, I grew up having, you know, New Teen Titans as my favorite book. You know, seeing Robin becoming a Nightwing. You know, Wally leaving,
Yep.
then become the Flash, etc. And I was talking to Marv at the beginning, and he told me a story about when he was in like issue 40 or something like that. He was asked by the new editor of Batman, "Hey, we need to get, you know, Dick back, DH him again, and make him Robin." And Marv was like, "Not a chance in hell, because, you know, I've been working for 5 years to make him an adult. Why don't we?" And that's why, you know, in the end, they created Jason Todd and all this and all that story. And I loved it since then. Growing up, and you and I are the same generation, I grew up with them. So of course,
Yeah.
Dick was my Nightwing is my favorite character, probably at DC. Then Wally, you know, became the Flash. They all became the new generation. Yeah. And then, of course, as you said, for me, it's a continuum going from Marv to Mark. You know, from Wally being Kid Flash, leaving being Kid Flash, and then becoming really the Flash with Mark Waid. So, how important do you think it is for DC, if it is important, in your opinion, that generational aspect, that, you know, from the JSA to the JLA, from, you know, the new team to become adults and all that?
It's built into the history of it, right? The moment you had Showcase #4 with Barry Allen as a new Flash and a new kind of Flash, that was the birth of the legacy of DC, and it's always going to exist. You can't deny it. You shouldn't deny it. You know, you should embrace it, because it just is, you know, it is what it is. Like it you know, it's I think like it's a part of the universe, and it's a wonderful part of the universe. Like, I love Jaime Reyes, the new Blue Beetle. I love Ted Kord, the old Blue Beetle. And there was Dan Garrett, the Golden Age Blue Beetle before that. And there's going to be stories where, like, look, Ted Kord wasn't that interesting or popular until Keith Giffen got a hold of him and Mark DeMatteis and Justice League, right? And suddenly he became a really popular character, at least for me. I loved him in that era.
Yeah.
So all these characters have these pockets where, if the right creator get on them, they can make them interesting. And I don't care if it's a Golden Age character or a brand new legacy character. If you have the right creators on them and they pop, then that's great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it gets complicated when you try and control the DC universe. You try and put rules on it. You try and limit it. You try and streamline it. You know, I think Crisis on Infinite Earths was the most successful at that, but it kept the legacy. Like, you look at that thing, it didn't roll it back. It actually just condensed it and then moved it forward, right? It introduced new characters. I mean, Yolanda Montez Wildcat was introduced in that to be the new Wildcat. So there were a lot of, like, legacy characters introduced that didn't go on in the comics to become very successful, like Wally West Flash, but they existed, and the ideas were there. I don't think that means this is all, by the way, just my personal opinion.
Of course.
But like, I like when all the characters exist. Like, when we did Green Lantern Rebirth, somebody said on Green Lantern Rebirth, hey, Kyle Rayner should die in this. And I said, are you out of your mind? Like, I really like the character Kyle Rayner. Like when I was growing up on Green Lantern, John Stewart was Green Lantern. Then a bunch of characters, Guy Gardner and Hal Jordan and John Stewart. Then Kyle Rayner. I was like, we can't, like, they're all interesting characters in their own right. And Green Lantern also is this Rebirth is supposed to be celebratory. That's how I see Rebirth. Rebirth is not constrictive; it's celebratory. That term is celebratory. And it means all inclusive to me. It means, like, everything and new stuff moving forward. Like, you don't want to just bring everybody back and, like, do this, but you want to bring it all back with a vision of what you're going to do next, what's coming up, what's going to be new and different in addition to this. You know, expand the universe, don't contract it. And so something like Green Lantern Rebirth wasn't just about bringing Hal Jordan back, but Hal and John and Guy and reconfirming Kyle and Sinestro and the entire Green Lantern Corps and the Guardians, and then hinting towards Blackest Night and the bigger picture, like all that was in those 5 issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so the legacy aspect, it's not just, you know, and it's slow. You got to take time. Sometimes they burn through these legacies so fast. There's a new character, a new version. It's like
Slow down.
maybe slow down and let these characters, like, give them a chance.
Yeah.
You know, give them a chance. And I also truly believe in the diversity and the depth of the DC universe too. Like there's characters in there that people have written off, and I've written a lot of titles like that. And I've been told on Teen Titans, when McCone and I were doing Teen Titans, someone said to Mike, "Don't waste your time. Like, you're wasting your time on Teen Titans because it's a dead franchise. It's a dead comic book." Same with Aquaman. Ivan, Joe, and I were told, "Well, you guys are going to Aquaman after Blackest Night." We're like, "Yeah, we love the character. We're gonna make it cool." And there's this kind of almost like air about, like, you guys should be jumping onto Batman and Justice League and events. And it was like, well, no, I want to work on characters I have a passion for first, you know, and also, like, I like taking characters that are forgotten and on the side and bringing them back up and trying to make them, you know, share my love for them through my stories that I work on with these artists, you know, like, but anyway, I think legacy is really important. I mean, I could talk about it all day, clearly, but I think the scope of the DC universe is really important, and it's not just about putting all the pieces back on the table and just, you know, doing adventures, but really doing it with a vision of why you want to do it, why it's important, and what you want people to feel.
Absolutely, and I absolutely agree with you about the slow burn. You know, like trying too much too fast without giving them time to, you know, to breathe, or creators the time to expand on their characters, really show what that character is about, what the core is. We keep going back to the heart, we keep going back to the core, but many times they don't even have time to get to the core, and so people see what's in the heart of that character before, you know, the plan is changed, or like, let them grow. We need to, like, the character grow. If we don't give them time, you're wasting a character and have to create another one in what, 3 months?
I also feel like there's a mix of creators that, like, if Grant Morrison has a passion to do a Clarion book, let him do the Clarion book. You know, let him make Clarion more interesting than he's ever been. You've got to let creators who care, who have passion for characters that aren't on your must-do list, to happen.
Yeah.
You know, because Animal Man, I promise you, DC did not go to Grant Morrison and say, "Can you write an Animal Man book?" He came to them with Animal Man, right? Mm-hmm. There's certain books, like, you know, they're going to want to do a Batgirl book or Teen Titans book or whatever, but there are also people like, you know, we pitched Booster Gold, we pitched Doomsday Clock. Gary and I did. Like, nobody asked us to do Doomsday Clock. We're like, we have this idea to do Doomsday Clock with Dr. Manhattan and these characters, and I remember having breakfast with Dan and the Dio, who I love working with, and we were talking about the story, and out of that conversation came Mime and Marionette. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and it came out of an organic conversation about story and not anything but, you know, it wasn't a edict, you know, it was, and on Teen Titans, when he was like, you know, Teen Titans, he didn't say, "Here's the team." He said, "What about Teen Titans?" And I said, "Let me think about it." And I said, "Here's the team." Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Great." And you need to let that organic passion, I think, really filter into this stuff, because otherwise you can tell when it's just assigned work. You can tell when it's just, here's the team and here's the 5 characters we've chosen for you, and go write this book. Yeah. And it becomes very, you know, you've got to find it a little bit backwards.
I love that you clarified that part about, sorry to interrupt, about Doomsday Clock, because, of course, you know, there's the legend that Dan impose on you to do that book. He wanted to do it because he wanted to fuck with Alan Moore, etc., etc. So I love that you just say it.
No.
It was you guys talking to them. We want to do this book. That's it.
Yeah, no. Gary and I went to. Gary and I had this idea for Dr. Manhattan in the DC universe, and I went to Dan, talked about it, and we got it approved, and then Gary and I talked about Doomsday Clock for a long time before we decided to do it, because we didn't know if we wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. And then the story kind of hit. I was in England with them, and the story kind of, we were there working, and the story hit us, and I'm like, we got to tell the story. We're so super passionate about the story, and I'm so glad we did, because it's one of the books I'm most proud of I've ever done in my career. And Dan was super supportive of it, and he and I talked a lot about story and a lot about, you know, and also, like, you know, we took it seriously. Like, we're not going to just, you know, kind of throw it out there, and we don't want it to cross over to we didn't want it ever to cross over into anything. We just wanted to tell a story here, and Dan was our champion for that. He protected that story, because I think a lot of people could have just said, do crossovers and make, you know, put like all the characters in, like, let's have Rorschach and issue Batgirl. Like, he didn't do that, as tempting as I think it could have been. He really helped to protect the integrity of that book at the time. But no, it wasn't like a big conspiracy. Like, nobody wants to piss Alan Moore off. That's ridiculous, you know. It's silly. Like, I also think they think people are much more Machiavellian than they are, you know. But no, Dan was never ever like that. And every time we ever pitched, I mean, I remember we got in an argument on Aquaman #1, and ultimately because of something we wanted to do, and ultimately he's like, you know what, if you guys feel so passionate about it, go for it. And then he called me after. He's like, you know what, that was a good decision. It was like it was the right thing to do. That's what you want from a good editor, somebody who's going to challenge you, but if you really believe in it, they'll support you, you know. And if they challenge you, sometimes you'll think about it and be like, oh, you know what, maybe you're right, and you'll change it. That's happened to me too. But like, it's all the best. I think the best creative books come out of an organic process of creator and editor, and, you know, because it's art and commerce coming together. And as long as you guys have passion for the characters, hopefully it'll be heading the right direction with the right compass. But it all depends on, you know, you got to have that compass, and at least to me, you got to have that love for the characters. Don't write them if you don't love them.
Yeah.
Like, don't say I got to go read 100 issues of this character to understand them. Like, that's dangerous.
Yeah, I love that. Like a week ago, so I had Levitz here, and he told me, you know, about when you and Dan came in to pitch 52, I think it was, and how, you know, he gave a couple pointers, then you guys left, and a week later came back with all the thing already here, and also talked to Dan before that, and it's fun to see how he was talking about what he learned from Paul in that sense, you know, that yes, I'm here to point in a certain direction, but if the creators know what they're doing and they're passionate about it, you gotta let them roll with it. That's the role of an editor.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think Paul was great, and Dan was really great about that, because we would present things to Paul, and he would give notes. 52, I remember specifically. I don't remember exactly which notes he gave, but I do remember they changed it a lot, because we left the office going, oh, okay, and we changed in a good way, and we changed it and we came back. But yeah, I think that, you know, the best times, like 52 is such a great experience, because I got to work with 3 of the greatest writers in comics of all time, Grant Morrison, Mark Waid, and Greg Rucka, and we had a great time. Steve Wacker was our editor for a lot of that, Mike Zaglain. And Dan was involved in that, but we had a good time, because we were in our kind of own bubble with all these characters that no one really cared about what happened to Booster Gold or Question or Black Adam or, you know, Ralph Dibny. We got to kind of tell these stories without any constrictions. Just we're all challenging each other on what's the best story. And 52 became a really labor of love. As much work as it was so much work, because it was weekly.
Absolutely.
But it was so fun. It was so fun, and I don't know if, you know, and having that caliber of writers together was magic. You know, it doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah,
like, that you're gonna put yourself aside for the greater good of a book. It was great.
Yeah, and also JG doing.
Oh yeah, those covers
cover every week.
Yeah, every week those covers were brilliant. No, that was one of my favorite experiences in comic books. Period.
Yeah.
And, you know, you look back, everyone says, like, what's your favorite book? You're like, well, my favorite books are the ones I work with people I love. Like, those are what your favorite books become.
Yeah. I remember what Paul told me, that you guys came in the office, you know, to pitch it. And he said, I'm just, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I think that's what he told me, that you guys came with the idea of, you know, the 1 year jump. And he said, okay, that's been done several times. why don't you guys tell the story of what happened that year, like
Yes.
52, and that's
Yeah.
where the name came from and all that.
Yeah.
And he said that you literally went like, oh my god, and left
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
your brain exploded with ideas.
Yeah, it was because we could go back and fill in the holes of what had happened, and I remember also too there was like there was also a question about who was it going to feature, because we didn't want it to feature the main characters. We wanted to feature like obscure DC characters that would represent different corners of the DC universe.
Mm-hmm. When you're writing for in your brain, when you're devising a plot or a script, it depends on the character. I mean, well, of course, it depends on the artist. We said that before, but there's some characters that you let more loose in terms of how you write them. Meaning, this character needs me to be more tight in how I tell his story to the artist or to the audience, and or on other characters or groups where you say, you know what, people knows what to expect. I can leave the story looser and let them fill in the gaps.
I've never ever thought like that. No.
Sorry, I'm crazy. You know that.
Yeah, no, I've never ever been like, oh, this story can kind of do. No, I mean, no, I try and write every story the same with as much detail and focus and intent as I can. I never kind of like I never write like, hey, there's a big fight on pages 12 through 16. Have fun. Just have they fight through the city. I've never done that in my life, because to me every panel is precious, because you only have so many pages in a comic book. Mm-hmm. So it's all intent, and I don't think just saying, oh, let's do a fight scene for 3 pages because it's time to do a fight scene never really occurs to me. Like, it just isn't how I think about comics. So I mean, not to say, by the way, I always defer to the artist too. If I write a page that has 5 panels and they want to do 3 or 7, or they want to add something, like 9 times out of 10, I'll say, absolutely, yeah, go for it. Like, you're the director, I'm the writer. Like, so if they want to tell the story slightly different, as long as the intent is still the same. But I don't tend to just kind of get looser with characters. I think everything I do, I try and be as detailed as possible. Again, with the caveat that I want the artist's input. That's why I work with the best artists in the business, not just because their illustrations are beautiful, but because they're storytellers with passion and point of view. Yeah.
Those also are what I find amazing in all your. By the way, what I meant to clarify that some writers, as you know, when the fights come, they say, okay, do your thing. This is the fight you want to tell. Do it your way.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's why I was asking if with some artists, or depending on the character, you did that. But thank you for clarifying. Yeah. That's what what I love the most is that the artists you work with, your usual collaborators, are all of them, with no exception, they are amazing storytellers. Have you found yourself in a situation, no names, I'm not scared about names, where you just have to go back to the artist and say, hey, we're telling a story. We are not doing, a serious or different pinups here. Have you ever had that situation where you found yourself frustrated because the artist would not tell the story?
Never. Not my long 21-year career have I ever had an artist had to call an artist and say anything negative. Like, you always give each other constructive feedback here and there, but there's never been anything like where I'm like, hey, don't draw pinups, don't draw this, that. And it's, every artist I've worked with, they've brought something incredible to the table, and I've learned something from them. But I've never, you just do, but I've never had a problem where I felt I had to say anything like that.
That's amazing.
I've been very lucky.
What if you had to define, in 1 word, 5 words, whatever, which one of your common collaborators, the guys you have worked with many times, for example, if I ask you about Ivan, what do you think defines him as an artist?
Man, there's so many things that define Ivan.
Okay, you can say a lot. I won't.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, like, for him, it's like, beauty and power. He really has a very beautiful. Like he's kind of like Neil Adams and Alan Davis.
Yes.
There's a beauty to his work, and a power to his work. His characters feel strong and present. They have presence, and he also does just beautiful illustrations. Like every panel is a work of art. It's like, you could blow it up and hang it on a wall. But and he's amazing at storytelling and the big giant spreads of like, powerful characters.
Yeah, I love it because I've always considered him like a perfect mixing of the best qualities of Alan Davis and Neil Adams. So when you just said yeah, amazing. Look, Gary.
Oh my God, Gary, emotional. To me, that's the first thing I think of, emotional, because the thing that I love, one of the many things I love about Gary Frank, beyond who he is as a human being, is one of my closest friends in the entire world, is Gary cares. And he thinks about everything from here, which I do too. When it comes to story, we want to elicit emotion in the reader. We want to say something. We want to make the audience. We always think about, what do we make the audience feel, and the detail work he does in emotion, and just plain like normal scenes, not superhero scenes, but just grounded normal scenes. The details that he pulls off are just, they're just beautiful, and they're original. Everyone's so unique. He doesn't have like a happy face. He's got like, it's different every time. So it feels incredibly real and cinematic, but emotional is the word, and it's the biggest compliment I can give anybody, because emotion is all that matters, and him being emotional, he's the most emotional artist I know.
Absolutely. I think one of his Superman faces is worth 1,000.
I agree.
Just the emotion he can portray in Superman face in one panel. I've told him this. He's one of my favorite people in the world too. It's like, you can do in one panel, in one face of Superman, what many people takes them 1,000 panels to portray that emotion. I think I can only put Jose Luis Garcia Lopez in that same category.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, he's amazing. I mean, he's amazing.
And what about Scott Collins?
Oh, I love Scott. When I think of him, frenetic, energized. He gets so excited, and he's got this kind of cool, like sketchy but detailed storytelling to him, and he's fast. He's really fast, but I think of him as energy. Like, he just brings a lot of energy to his work. He always is looking at every scene, even if it's just Captain Cold walking down the street. How do I put the energy into it? And detail. He's not afraid to draw cities. I remember we were doing this. We talk about this a lot, but we were doing this issue about Gorilla Grodd, which he draws great monsters too. And there was this double-page spread of the city at the end, when you just saw this trail of destruction that Grodd caused. And I said, I just want to show you how dangerous he is. Like, just 2 city blocks. The whole story was just to show, because we had just come off like Jail 8, and it was a little goofy, and we wanted to show how dangerous Grodd was. So he escaped prison. He escaped a prison transport, and Flash caught him 2 blocks later. But to catch him and to defeat him was like insane. And so we had this beautiful spread that he did. And I remember I called him. I said, Scott, you just showed me you can draw cities. And so if you look at every issue beyond that, suddenly there were like double-page spreads of Flash running with Keystone City behind him, and like I was just like, I want to see that city again, and he would always laugh at me. But yeah, Scott's, and Scott is, I'm still working with him now. We're doing an issue of something right now that I'm excited for people to hear about later. But and he, like, I've been working with him since the very beginning. He drew on Stars and Stripe. Like he like drew 3 or 4 issues of that. So it's fun to be able to have that connection to your favorite collaborators from then to now.
Yeah. How important was it for you to write JSA as a human being?
Oh, back then. Oh, well, it's funny. When JSA first started way back when, the Flash was that was the one I wanted to write. Flash and the Hulk, right? But the Flash, like at DC, it was the Flash. And I got on the Flash like within a year of starting in comics, they needed a fill-in issue on Flash, and I was, super excited. And then they said, "Do you want to stay?" And I said, "Sure." And I got to write the Flash, and I wrote Wally West for about 5 years. I loved it. JSA was different. I wrote Stars and Stripe, and James Robinson and David Goyer had started JSA, and they were going to put her in it. And so we met, and they asked me questions about the character, and then they used her. And early on, before the book even came out, David Goyer came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to co-write this book? James is leaving." And I got on the book at like issue 3. I never, I loved the JSA, and I thought about them, but they'd never had their book back then.
Mm-hmm.
So I got on it, and I had such a great time on that book. I ended up writing it for almost 10 years. So it became important to me, but I never, back in the day, I always thought Flash, it was really like Flash, Hulk, but Flash, a DC Flash was the book I wanted to write. I loved all the other characters. I'd love to write a Metamorpho title. I'd love to write a Outsiders title. I'd love to write, there's a bunch of titles that I love, but ultimately it was, it was Flash. That was the one. But so JSA became important to me. I love the JSA. There's a couple corners of the DC universe that I just have a huge affinity for, like Flash, like Green Lantern, like JSA, clearly Stargirl connected to that. Those are kind of become my favorite places to live. But I also love Superman. I love Legion of Superheroes. I could have lived there more. Gary and Frank and I were going to do a Superman and Legion of Superheroes book at some point. I forget why we didn't. But we were about to do a Superman and Legion of Superheroes book after our run. And then I think we went and did Batman Earth 1. But, I like right now I'm working up with Jason Fabok, who's a brilliant artist. And he's one of my more recent collaborators. We've been working together. I don't know, probably 4 years together, maybe 5. I can't really remember, but he and I have developed this amazing bond. And Batman 3 Jokers has been such a unique experience to me because it's such a different book than anything I've ever written, because it's a Batman title. I haven't, or a Joker title. I haven't really written Batman and Joker beyond them appearing in crossovers. And then there's Batman Earth 1 that I consider a very different take on Batman, a very much more grounded, guy learning to be Batman than the kind of core canon Batman. So that's become a really interesting experience, and that's a cool corner to live in that I haven't spent a lot of time, mostly because Batman's awesome already. I don't feel like he needs to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
I like going where characters need a little help. It's just JSA. It's fun to do JSA or Hawkman or Booster Gold because people's expectations are low, and they're they don't really know the character. It's fun to kind of open up new characters to them.
Mm-hmm. How emotional was for you to get the green light on the Stargirl TV show?
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, I pitched it to Warner TV, and they really liked it, and they greenlit it, and it was huge because for me it was full circle. It was kind of taking my entire career from working with Dick Donner and writing comics and working at DC and everything to kind of come full circle back to that character, and I'm really proud of the show. And I brought, I remember I called James Robinson, who lives in Vegas, and I said, and he's a good friend of mine. He's like a brother. I've known him since I was 19. I met him at a show, and we became kind of pen pals back in the day. And I loved his work on Starman and the JSA, and he was the one that he helped get me Stars and Stripe started. He made a phone call to Mike Carlin when I turned the proposal in and said, "Hey, you should check this out. It's really cool." And I owe him a lot professionally and personally, but when I got the green light, I called him up. I said, "Okay, so I'm doing this show. I need you in the writer's room." He was super excited, and he said he'd never been in a TV show before. And I said, "Look, I need you in there because you have the heart and the knowledge that, that I have. We look at the DC universe the same way. We love the Golden Age characters the same way. We're going to make this show celebratory of that era in this corner of the universe. We haven't explored it as true to canon as we can make it." And so it was, not only important for me to see the character because she's based on, obviously my sister, and she was the first character I ever wrote for DC Comics, and it means a lot to my family just to see that character, up on screen. It's cool, right? It's really exciting. But it also was like for me to work with James Robinson, and I had a wonderful writing staff, but James was the one I knew forever, and to work with him every day on it. And he came to a lot of production in May. He was there in Atlanta, he was there, and it was great. But to make that show, it was really special. And I worked with so many amazing people on the writing staff, on the crew, the directors, the cast is fantastic. Luke and Breck are amazing, amazing people, amazing actors. And the feedback on the show has been so positive. And all of us have been really happy that people have embraced the show. I'm really proud of it. And I'm happy that, happy and grateful it exists, but it is kind of full circle for me. Yeah. It's kind of starting somewhere and then, ending up here. And I that to me is like, I look at that, I'm like, oh, that's, in a lot of ways, I feel like this is, a little personal, I guess, but I feel like, oh, right, I was kind of always meant to do this for my sister. Like, my love of comics actually happened because I was supposed to end up doing this for her. Like, it's not because I love comics that I end up doing it. It's actually like I was meant to love comic books so that when she wasn't here anymore, I could do something for her. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a really it was a great experience. It was the best experience of my entire life.
Yeah, that's why I was asking first about JSA, because I wanted to bring it exactly full circle, to the point where your sister starts on a stripe, and then 10 years in JSA, and then your whole career seems to be destined to get to this point. And even your other, movie, TV work, we won't get into that, but you get to that point where now is the time to go, to go full circle and go back to Stargirl. I think what defines the show for me, at least, is hope. That's when I watched the pilot and second and third episode, I ended, and I talked to Paloma, to my wife, and then she sat down with me, asked her, what's the word you think that defines this series? And she told me exactly the same way. This hope is what defines the show.
Yeah, that's for sure. And all the experience that I've had, on comics and TV and film has kind of helped prepare me for that show. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful for that. Like, it's been a kind of a blessing.
Yeah, I think I know who the other guy who got really happy because of your phone call to James, probably Sterling. When you talk him about that phone call, Sterling Gates were like, yes.
Sterling, yes. Oh yeah. Yes, Sterling Gates is like, if James is my older brother, Sterling Gates is my younger brother. Like, he's like, he lives really next. He just lives down the street from me, Sterling. And I talk to him. It's funny because this pandemic has given you more time to kind of connect with people you really care about. I really care about him. I talk to him at least a couple times a week, and he's a great guy. He loves the DC universe, comics, and this world. Working on Flash TV show he did for a bunch of years, and now he's working on his next thing, which is super exciting. But he's a great guy too. Me and James used to hang out quite a bit.
Yeah, I love him to death. I love Sterling to death. He's an amazing writer. He should get more credit for how good he is, and also a really incredible human being. I love him to death.
I love when there's writers that have like this defining run. Like his run on Supergirl is the high point of that character's publishing history.
Absolutely.
You look what he did on Supergirl, and you're like, he elevated that book, and that was like one of my favorite books when he was writing it, because it's just consistently good and exciting and new. And Jamal Igle drew a beautiful book. Like, it was such a great title. But yeah, to me, that's the high point for Supergirl. That's like Marvin George on Titans. Like, if you talk about Supergirl runs,
yes,
you talk about, maybe you talk about Sterling's run, maybe Jeff Loeb in the beginning with, with Mike Turner when they brought her back. There's not a lot of other high points for that character.
Yeah, absolutely. when I had Sterling in Madrid a couple years ago at the show, and he thought that people was going to not know him, like, yeah, just this brand, not important. But I knew people would just nonstop,
Yeah.
praising him, saying exactly what you just said. This is the best
Yeah.
one I've ever read.
Yeah.
Define Supergirl. And I loved how emotional he got with people's reaction to his work. Like, everybody knew his
Yeah.
work, and everybody kept telling him, "You're the best writer that character ever had. You defined her." And why? When are you coming back? People kept asking,
Yeah.
"When are you coming
Yeah.
back?" Because Supergirl
Yeah.
missed you. And I love how
Yeah.
emotional. The guy's emotional in a good way.
Yeah.
He got how emotional he got about it, and I was so happy
Yeah.
to see him get that reaction, from validation from people saying,
Yeah.
"You deserve this. You did an
Yeah.
amazing work, and you deserve a lot more credit than you usually get."
Yeah. I agree. I mean, it's nice to hear about that, but
Mhm.
it's like and I'll say this too about Sterling's an example that he cares so much. You have these writers who there's a quantifiable list to me of writers that just exude passion for these characters in a very in a way where you can't wait to whatever character, like Mark Waid, any character at DC Universe he would write, I would be like, I can't wait. Grant
Oh yeah.
Morrison, like,
Oh yeah.
there's people that they just exude this love for DC, and like, I'd be like, imagine like, Mark Waid writing any DC comic, Grant Morrison writing any DC comic, like Sterling, I love any like where you really get your claws into it. James Robinson, you really get your claws into, and by the way, a minor character, like, a C-list character. That's the most exciting thing to me. Like, but there are those writers where you share passion with them, and like if they wrote, whatever character it would be, you would be, you'd be super interested in what they're going to say.
Yeah.
Anytime Mark Waid wrote a book, or Grant Morrison wrote a book, or Sterling James, and there's many more, but it was always, that's exciting. You can feel that passion. You can feel that, they're not just jumping on for 6 issues to do it and then jumping somewhere else.
I personally want Jeff Loeb to come back and write comics.
Oh my God.
Like Jeff, I was talking to Tim 2 weeks ago, and I was like, "Is he coming back? I want him to come back and write."
Yeah, I mean,
one of the perfect examples of what you just said about you knew he wrote specifically for each artist, because everything changed so much. This is for Tim. This is the kind of script. He was so specific in that. I miss it a lot.
Yeah, Jeff, Jeff to me, he's one of my very close friends. We shared a writing office for 8 years. He's a fantastic writer. Comics would be lucky if he came back and wrote some comics, right? Because his not only were they good, they always sold. It'd be huge for him to come back. But they'd have to give him the freedom. They'd have to give him the, like, he pitched Superman for all seasons. He pitched Batman Hush. No one told him to do that.
Yeah.
Jeff came up with all that. And that's what Jeff does. He's more than just a writer. He's an idea machine.
Mm-hmm.
And and he but he would, I'd love to read a new book by him.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a new Superman book or a new Batman title? Like, it'd be amazing. It'd be so refreshing, because like it'd be so clean. Like, he would tell really real stories that were like Long Halloween. You would just get into and enjoy it, and not have, I feel like everything's in a perpetual crossover right now. It'd be great to just have some good stories with these characters, and get out of like the perpetual crossover, the perpetual reboot, the perpetual, it's just kind of a little endless. So I just want stories with my characters that are great,
that's what,
and also create a team that takes a character like we did with Green Lantern and just runs with it and has fun with it. That's what I want to read right now.
That's what we discussed at the beginning. We need to go back to ground the characters, go back to the heart, and give it to the people. Like non-stop crossovers, epic stories. Like, sometimes we just have to go back, like in Claremont's X-Men again. Those feelings they had to ground the characters. Yeah. We just had an epic story. Now they're going to go to a bar or a disco or to the beach and just have fun, because I want you to relate to them again. So
Yeah.
I'm handling that problem, with DC. I need to relate to those characters again. How can we do that?
Yeah, well, by the way, you can tell epic, giant, huge stories in a single title. You don't need to cross over 10 books, which dilutes it a lot of, one of the, but I think you can get as big and bombastic in a single book and make it feel gigantic without having to, cross over to 10 different books. But yeah, like I'd love like Grant Morrison's Animal Man. Like, I don't know if that would happen today. Like, I don't know if they'd support like a book called Animal Man anymore, Yeah, I'd love to see more of that.
We should say hello to people and see what questions.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, we could talk.
No. That's on me. It's not you. Okay, let me see. Stanley Man, hello. I know you have your own experience creating characters like a Stargirl. I was wondering, what are the key things to think about when creating a character's origin as a writer?
The key things to think about for creating origins as a writer. Well, you want to be unique. You want to be thematically connected to what you're trying to say. But creating an origin story for like Superman, or we kind of retold origin stories for like Green Lantern and Superman and like through flashbacks, Aquaman and stuff. But I always try and make it on point with who they are and what they're about and what the comic book's about. Like, Green Lanterns to me was about overcoming fear. Like, that was the core concept about people who overcome fear and are chosen for this higher honor. And then as I got deeper into it, it was not only about that emotion, but about a guy who needed to confront his own emotions, be self-aware. And so rolling that back and looking at his origin, it had to be a guy that was very, kind of had all his emotions underneath him and was very kind of cocky and cocksure, and that's who Al Jordan was. But whenever I think about origins, whether it's new characters or old characters, I try and get under the hood of how they feel in a way that is, that helps define why they do what they do and how they act the way they act. But I always start from here before I start from here.
La Atlantida DC says, Jeff, I love you. And anybody else? Felipe Gonzalez asks, hello, Mr. Jones. The Flash was the first comic book that I read from you. How did you get the opportunity to write the series? That's you already answered. So did you plan for your long run, and why did you leave the book?
On Flash, Joey Cavallari, the editor at the time, called me and said, hey, we have a new writer coming on, but we have like 6 issues to fill. Do you want to write it for 6 issues? I said, yes. That was like this was early on, and I was so excited to write Flash because it was my favorite character. And I wanted to do a story where he and Captain Cold teamed up because I love Captain Cold. And so I actually own the last page of Flash 164, which is my first issue. And it's a big splash of Captain Cold by Angel. And he did a beautiful Captain Cold, very Carmine Infantino-esque. So I started writing it. I think it was after I turned in the second issue script, maybe the first or second issue script, Joey called me and said, hey, the writer that was going to take over isn't going to take over. Do you want to just stay? And I said, absolutely. And so you can see this 6 issue. My first 6 issues were actually designed to be just a kind of a closed off story that didn't really set a tone. And then my next issue with Scott started. That's when I was like, okay, I'm going to own the tone of this. And we started to change Keystone City into Detroit, really a blue collar town. We brought back the rogues that they had been ignored for years and years, and really tried to redefine them. And we tried to give the book a grounded feel. There was no red anywhere except the Flash suit and blood. So we wanted it to like, there was a very conscious choice of, okay, no red, but Flash and blood, so that the blood would stand out and it'd be scary because we wanted stakes to be real. But that's how the Flash came about. And then I wrote it for 5 years. I left it after Howard Porter and I had done all these stories, and I had done this story with Zoom where, I was going to give Wally his kids, and they were going to have a family. I wanted to end on a happy note with a future, and so I knew that they wanted to relaunch the book, and there were plans for a new Flash. But even before that, I had decided, you know what? I told my story. Like I told, like, this is the story I wanted to tell. And I felt really good about leaving the book, even though I loved it. And I often will do that when I'm in the middle of a book. I'm like, I can never leave this title. And then I get to a place where I'm like, this is where I should leave. There's only one title I ever left, maybe two. I left where I didn't feel like that, but I felt like really good, and I left Flash at 225 because I just felt like I had done my story with Wally, and I told it, and it was time to move on to something else, and I could put that on my shelf and be happy that I did what that was my life dream, was writing Flash.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my life dream was writing the Flash, and then my life dream changed into like, you know, oh, seeing Stargirl, a TV show. That was my life. Like it evolved, but Flash was when I was a little kid, writing that book was my absolute dream, and I'm grateful I got to do it.
Mm-hmm. Metropolis Mallorca asks, is it in your future plans and to do any books that involve the JSA or Legion of Superheroes? If there is, he cannot answer, guys. That's things he cannot answer. Just so you know.
Legion of Superheroes I love, but I don't really have plans for that. And JSA, like, you know, I do want to do stuff with JSA. Brian and Hitch and I have talked about doing a JSA book. He really wants to do that, so we'll see if DC wants to do it. But it'll all depend on timing and schedule, really.
Okay.
Like everything else.
Okay. Isaiah Soyo says, Hi, Mr. Jones. I'm a big fan of your work. Why the premature end of Shazam? I really like your run on the character, and I was hoping for a long series.
I mean, really, that was scheduled more than anything else. Dale and I, it was like the pandemic hit, I felt like I had this story, like good 13 issue story. And I've got a lot of other work coming up, and it just felt like, oh, you know what, this is the right issue to leave. And we told this really cool Mr. Mind Shazam family story. And I had another story for it, but Dale had to take a break too. And it just didn't, like, without Dale, as much as I love Scott, like Scott Collins is drawing some of the issues, it's just like we started that book together, and without Dale, it just didn't feel like continuing the book was in the cards for us.
Mm-hmm. Lofren Howard asks, Hi, Jeff. I love your work. About JLA and JSA, Virtue and Vice, was it originally a crossover with the Authority?
No, never. It was always just JLA and JSA. That's I don't know where that came from.
No.
Carlos Pacheco, that's amazing.
I just flipped when I read that the Authority. I had never thought. Never read that. How was it to work with Carlos? By the way, that you mentioned it.
Oh, it was great. I mean, he was such a passionate guy about the DC universe. Like, it was amazing. It's been a long time now, but it was such a joy to watch him do an original graphic novel like that.
Mm-hmm. Ricardo says, Hi, Jeff. Congrats for your career as a writer. You think what happened the last month with Diamond and DC Comics is again changing for the industry, and the single issue comic book edition as a standard? I think he means it. What do you think is things are going to change or stay the same?
It's hard to say. I own 2 comic shops with Car D'Angelo out in LA, Earth 2 Comics, and everybody's concerned about not only comic book business but the entire every business in the world. So it's hard to say. Like, I have opinions and thoughts, but comics are always going to exist because it's like an art form. No matter what, if they change and evolve, they will. They always do. They'll continue to change and evolve. But I don't know yet. I don't really have I'm not informed enough, I say, to really offer an opinion that would be more valid than anybody else's.
Yeah, I keep saying this every time you ask about these guys. The answer is we don't know. We can't know. We'll see what happens. It's an evolving situation. Okay. Which is what we can say. That's it. The Todo Paco says, in the first place, I want to say thank you for the Stargirl TV show. It's an amazing show. My first question, do you have in mind any comic that is not superhero comics? If you want to do anything,
yes,
superheroes.
Yes, quite a few. You will probably hear about one of those pretty soon, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll know. We'll know when it's time to know. Angel Perez,
You'll very.
website.
Oh, just very soon. I've already started working on something that's.
Okay, so he means really, really soon, guys.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, my whole goal is to make sure that whatever I work on is done and almost like so it comes out on time when we say it, because there's been like Doomsday Clock was something that Gary and I really wanted more lead time, and DC wanted to publish it early, so we felt like we had to try and speed up, but we never got the lead time that we would have made it. We would have been late anyway, to be honest, because it's a 30 page plus book and it's really complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But we would have been on way more on time and way more on schedule if we had the lead time. So whatever I work on, I really want for fans and retailers and for myself and my artist I'm working with is to have the books in the can, to have it all done before we solicit it. That's why Jay and I really fought to make sure that Three Jokers was done. Like, he's done. That book is done. It could be out right now, but DC decided to have it shipped in October or August. But really, like the for everybody who read Doomsday Clock, thank you for your patience, on that book. And I do take schedule incredibly seriously, and that's why we're really, when we announce the new books I'm doing, it'll be once we have them in the can, and I know when they're coming out, and they're going to be on time, because I don't want to not be on time ever again.
Yes, but let me tell you, give you an European point of view here, at least mine. In 2 years, nobody's going to care that book was late. It's going to people care about the quality, and that's an amazing book, And here, of course, it was affected also because of the delays at the Spanish edition. I mean, and by the end of the day, we're all thinking, I don't care if I have to wait. What I want is them to do a quality.
Yeah.
I don't want them to rush it and make a worse book than they could. So nobody's complaining about the delays. At least in Spain, people is saying, I like to wait when I get such an amazing book as this one.
That's great. I mean, the thing that I really like, I really wanted to do on this is keep the quality high in everything I do, because it was like, hey, let's get somebody else to draw issue Doomsday Clock. I was like, you're out of your mind. Like, it's not happening ever. No one's touching this but Gary. No one's going to touch Batman Three Jokers but Jay Fabok. Like, that's it. Across the board, covers, everything, alternate covers, everything. The only alternate cover we had on Doomsday Clock was one by Gibbons, and we on Three Jokers, all our alts are by Jay Fabok. It's just, and because Jay wanted to do it, he's like, I really want, I want to do everything on this book. I love this book, and I support that. I think it's great. Like, we want these books to feel special. We want these books to feel, they're because to us, they're not just another tire coming off the line in a factory. Like, they're important to us. They're special to us.
Yes.
They're not just like, oh, we need to publish these books every month. They never were like that to me, ever. They've never been that, because everything I put myself on my passion and my love in every comic book I write, and I want the quality. And at this stage in my life too, and my career, I want everything to be the best it can be. And if that takes more time than a monthly book, then that's what I've got to do.
Yeah, that's exactly what I love most about your work, is that it's always obvious how much you care, and if it has to, if it has to take time to be done, so it's the right book, so be it. So be it. And I'm always being a supporter of that, instead of we gotta rush the book so it understands. As I said, nobody cares that the Ultimates, to give another sample, was late 3, 4, 5 times.
Yeah, no.
You care that it was
such
such an epic and incredible book that changed comics in a way. So
I agree. It totally changed. But by the way, it totally changed comics. It's a beautiful book. But you're right. I just, what, I don't ever want to make people wait. I just don't want to. I want to deliver them a high quality product when they feel they want to read it, and make sure that they enjoy the story.
But just so you know, I just got 2 messages on WhatsApp by Mr. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. Please say hello for me to Jeff and to Sonia.
I will. So nice.
Okay. And Angel Perez says, hi everyone, nice to meet the Lord of the Power Rings and the Master of the Speed Force, Mr. Jones. This is an honor.
Oh, thanks guys.
Eduardo Sacristan says, hello Jeff, is there any character that you haven't written that you still like to do for DC? Is there any character at DC that you haven't written? Really? Is there any?
Well, you know what? I've written a lot of the characters, but a lot of the characters are kind of like been in crossovers or in the side.
True.
I really, I've really enjoyed, I have to say, with Batman 3 Jokers, characters that I like, but I never knew I'd love this much. Barbara Gordon and Jason Todd. I love those characters. I love those characters. I'd love to write Selena Kyle. I think I've kind of gotten a fondness for Catwoman after I wrote Batman Earth 3, Volume 3, because she's in that. But I wrote her there, so I guess I have written her. There are characters that there's a couple characters I love, and I'd love to take a shot at solo stories. But we'll see. Like there's a few out there. There's a few obscure ones out there. But there's nobody like, again, like every character I'm writing at the moment, like whether it's the Legion of Superheroes or Shazam or whoever, that's my favorite. So I don't know if I've got a couple that are on a list of like, I would like to do something with them, but we'll see. I don't want to name them in case I do.
Yeah.
Keep it a surprise.
Yeah, you just said solo stories. That brought to my mind. Would you ever like to do like an anthology book where you tell a different character's story per issue?
I thought about doing that actually, where I take a super obscure character and just kind of tell like as awesome a story as I can with them, just to try and see if I can like make them cool, make them exciting, make them emotional. But I have thought about that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That would be amazing. I would love to see that. Leyendas del Multiverso, that is in English, Legends of the Multiverse. Hey Jeff, love you and love your work. What were your influences while writing Batman Earth 1? And also, when do you think we'll be able to see the third volume?
The third volume is finished. Gary finished it up like a week or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's done. So whenever DC decides to release it, I finished the script a while ago. So it's all done. And it's by far and away my favorite volume. Like Gary and I are really, really happy with it. I'm super excited for people to read it. I think it's a cool continuation of what we started on volumes 1 and 2, but it elevates it even more. And there's a bunch of surprises and characters that you're not going to expect. And particularly towards the end, but I'm really excited for people to read that one. Mm-hmm. Can't wait till it's out. But I don't know, DC can release it anytime. It's really up to them.
Let's hope it's soon. Hi, Jeff. Did you have great moments working with Richard Donner? Thank you for your love for DC Comics.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Dick Donner's like my second father. I worked for him for 4.5 years, and I talk to him all the time. He's a really wonderful guy, super, obviously legendary director. But he was so, one of the things that I've learned, he's so inclusive. Like he would let me, when he was working on a movie, if he had a story meeting, he'd have me sit in. If he went to edit something, he'd have me sit in. If they were scoring something on stage with symphony, he'd have me sit in. And that was like such a wonderful experience. So, I try and do that too with like, my assistant now, like she comes everywhere. She can sit in on, she comes to like a symphony, or she'll sit in the editing room, like, because that's how people learn. Like they learn by just being around the process. And it was so generous of him to just let people be around him, just to see it and to learn and to be a part of it. And, but he's a super, super amazing human being.
Mm-hmm. Angel Perez, Mr. Jones, why Watchmen? Why those characters and a story to try, that's his opinion, to try and fix the problems with the New 52? Was it your own idea or was it a company idea?
My idea. It wasn't an edict or anything, and it was an idea that Gary Frank and I took incredibly seriously. And it wasn't really necessary to fix the New 52. I think DC Universe Rebirth helped, maybe course correct it a little bit, mm-hmm. By putting a heartbeat back in. That was our hope, at least in the moment. But with Doomsday Clock, it was really more about taking the DC universe and the Watchmen universe and contrasting those two, and mm-hmm. seeing the cynical reality of Watchmen and the optimistic fantasy of DC, and seeing what how do those two integrate? How do those two talk to each other? And that entire series is about duality and about sides. The world today is like everyone's kind of almost forced. If you speak up, you're forced to take a side. You're not allowed to kind of try and talk to both sides, or to say, you know, let's listen to both sides and try and bring them together. There's a lot of animosity and a lot of kind of intolerance to different viewpoints, which I find, and I'm sure a lot of people find, unfortunate, really unfortunate. And I think it's just gotten to people shouting at each other from across the way. And the whole story of Doomsday Clock is exploring the dangers of two sides and two choices and duality, and that's laced in every single story in that book. Ultimately, it's Superman who comes in and is the olive branch, is the bridge, who shows Dr. Manhattan that it doesn't have to be this way or this way. There's a third way to go. There's a third way to find hope together. And if you can come together, and that's what the story's about. The story's not about fixing the New 52 or continuity or that like, you know, Dr. Manhattan was never trying to fix anything. Dr. Manhattan was looking at the DC universe and finding this anomaly called Superman and wondering why he always existed. Why the entire metaverse, as I like to call it, was wrapped around this character. Like Superman changes everything. When changes come, Superman converts everything through the metaverse, this living, breathing universe. And he wanted to understand why. So he changed one thing to kind of take Superman's parents away, and he started messing with Superman to see, like, will this guy still find hope? And he does. Like, he's watching it, and then when he does that, he starts to experiment with the timeline. Suddenly he sees his vision that's supposed to go everywhere suddenly sees black darkness, and he thinks, is Superman going to destroy me? The last thing he sees is Superman coming at him like this, and he thinks, is Superman going to destroy me, or do I destroy everything? Which one is it? And ultimately, Superman helps him get to the third position. I'm not going to destroy you, but I want you to understand what's going on now in our world, and I need your help.
Yeah.
And we do this together. And so that's really what the story was about. You know, it's I think people get sometimes focused on the continuity of all, but I never, like Doomsday Clock, when Gary and I talked about it, we were never like, let's fix continuity. We were like, let's bring back the past and the future, the JSA and the Legion by the end of it, because it was representative of all of DC, like the past and the future coming back, and thanks to Superman and Dr. Manhattan. But it was always about the duality and how do we help each other come together and choose a third way? Because right now there's no third option in the world.
Yeah, I consider myself equidistant in a way, you know, in terms of positions, always try to be in the middle. That's something that they say from the people from my state, from Galicia, that they never know if you're going upstairs or downstairs, because we always try to be in the middle. But when I read, when I ended, you know, reading Doomsday Clock, I honestly, and when I began, to be honest, I never thought it was trying to fix anything or to course correct anything. I just thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this was your ultimate love letter to Superman from you and Gary.
100%. Yeah, 100%. It's the powers. It was like a love letter about the power and importance of Superman, right? And because Gary and I love working on Superman, but it was about the importance and power of Superman, and that's, and like, he's so powerful, he can bring Watchmen and DC together. Like, that's how powerful he is, right? And he can affect, you know, he can affect, you know, if the cynicism of Watchmen infected DC a little bit, well, the optimism of DC can infect Watchmen back a little bit.
There you go. Go. Exactly. Atlantid asks, Jeff, what is the character of Black Manta for you? Thank you for your great work and love to DC.
Black Manta I think he's incredibly cold. I love that character. He's more in the line of like a Joker, Black Hand in my head, but he's also kind of understandable. Like, Aquaman killed his father in the storyline we told, and that drives him to revenge on Aquaman. And he's a very dark character. I find him, you know, ruthless and unrelenting and uncompromising, and he will stop at nothing to destroy Aquaman. Because look, if someone killed your father, you probably do the same thing.
Mhm.
You know, even if your father was a criminal, you'd still do the same thing. So I just see that character as like a shark. You know, it's going after Aquaman, never going to stop.
Okay. B. Pascal says, greeting from Argentina. Hello. Oscar asks,
Hello.
this is a weird question. Does Jeff Jones have a TikTok account?
No.
Neither do I.
I do not have a TikTok account. I'm way too old for TikTok.
Okay. Greetings from Spain. Joe DC, hello, how are you? Pedro de Mercader, it's hard for you to combine your career as a TV series creator and as a comic book creator too. Which skills you learn working in a medium that is useful that are useful for the other?
Oh yeah, I mean the comic book. I think comic books are so great for television because you're doing story after story after story, which is what television is. And television's the same thing. You're doing more, you know, complicated stories with longer scripts, but you're getting deeper into character. Same with film screenplays. You get much deeper into character because you have more space.
Mhm.
So everything that you work on in as a writer in film and television and then comic books, I think it all speaks to each other. I like doing everything. You know, it's fun. Like my first love is comics, like I said, but my second love as a writer is television because you get to tell these stories like comic books,
Mhm.
but in serialized chapters. And that's been really cool because you want to live with these characters. Like I'm someone who a lot of my runs early on I did for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever it was. And I'd much rather, like Shazam, someone said, like, you know, why do you leave early? Well, if Dale was ready to keep going and we really wanted to keep going, I would have loved to do Shazam for 5 years because I'd rather do long runs because you find things as you get deeper into stories. You know, you get to get more complicated with the characters, and they have more of an arc, more of a journey.
Yeah, as you were saying
So
before, you keep digging to find the core, right?
yes. Yeah, and you challenge that core. You know, other hard thing with comic books is like, you know, by the end of your 1 year, 3 year, 5 year run on Green Lantern, someone else is going to come on the book and keep going. So you've got to figure out how to kind of tell a story with an ending, but that ending also, you know, it's going to be open end for somebody else. So you need to. A lot of the storytelling is like reaffirming who that character is. You know, Jeff Loeb used to say there's two stories in comics with big characters. You tear them down or you build them up. And we always loved the stories building them up. It was much more fun to build them up and expand their universe than to kind of tear them down. That doesn't mean that you can't tell a story that tears them down and builds them up again. That's a really cool story. But
I also think go please.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say that I also think that, correct me if I'm wrong again because I'm wrong all the time, but I think it's much easier to tear them down than to build them up. I mean, tearing them down is just using the same tropes all over again. You know, I'm not talking about, of course, Born Again is an exception where you do just two geniuses just do it the right way. But building them up in a longer run, as you usually do, I think that's a much more difficult thing to do.
Well, I find it more like I love the Death of Superman story when I was a kid. Like that was cool. But the Return of Superman, the Reign of Superman, way more interesting. You know, it was such a better story. And one of my favorite, like, you know, by the way, Dan Jurgens is another favorite of mine that is defined DC in such a massive way that I think he deserves more credit than he gets too.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's definitely it's such a big thing to think about, you know, the way comics are. And again, they are changing right now. I think you're going to see shorter runs by creative teams. You're going to see less titles from, you know, the companies. I think, I don't know, you know, for sure, but I don't know if the days of like those kick-ass 5-year runs or 8-year runs, like Peter David on Hulk, you know, was like amazing. I don't know if we're going to get those anymore. I hope we do.
Yeah, me too. I don't think, as we said before, it's set in stone. It all depends on the COVID and how we get out of it, and if there's decisions on formats and blah blah blah.
Yeah, completely. And look, a great story. Like I'd rather have 12 issues of, you know, Green Lantern by Grant Morrison than none. You know, or 24. Yeah.
Let me see. Pedro Monge de Velasco says, Kevin Feige and Geoff Johns are good old friends. What do we have to do to get Johns to work for Marvel? Who do we have to bribe?
We'll see. We'll see.
Okay, next. Budweiser's. Great. JCDC says, great job with Green Lantern and Doomsday Clock and Justice League with Jim Lee. Thank you for your work on that. Joseph Neira says, you have the cosmic stuff behind you. Wow.
Yeah.
Juan Pablo Castilla says, Jeff, you're my hero. And Felipe says, I have always been curious about the violence in your work. Is it a tool that you have in order to show the reality of violence, or is it a form of expressions to make stories more epic?
I always try and just use whatever I deem, right for the story. So it's always like, if you're going to get more epic or big, that's the way, you want to tell the story. So it all depends on the story.
Jeff, would you write Las Crónicas de Atlantis? Says, that's Atlantis Chronicles, of course, he's an Aquaman fan. And he says, Jeff, would you write in a near future or in the future the rise of the Seven Seas? You think you will ever return to Aquaman?
No, no, that storyline, we kind of, actually, James Wan and I took that storyline. It's kind of what we did in the movie. So the Rise of the Seven.
Okay. Paco Fernandez.
David, I've got about 2 more minutes, and I got.
Yep. Yes. We've been a long time already, so let's let me wrap this up. Talking about the future, where do you see yourself as a writer?
Geez,
always, like, my question is, will you ever leave comics, or that's your core? We were talking about the core of your characters. That's your core.
I love comic books. I love, I love comics. I love, I love the medium so much. I'll always want to do something in comics. It all depends on schedule. Honestly, like Stargirl takes so much time. So if I end up doing, another season of it, if we get a green light for another season, that really takes me off the board for a while, because it takes every ounce of what I do. I can only really do so many comic books and do that. And I've got a couple other shows that I'm working on right now too, and writing. So it's tough. It's a tough thing, so I hope to do a lot more, but it's all about schedule. It's not about anything but time.
But my question wasn't that. My question is, you will always come back to comics, right? In a way or the other, if you have time.
If I have time, yes. I love comic books. It's all about comic books. If I have time, yes. It all depends on what I'm doing.
Okay, that's so. You guys, that's it. We could continue like forever, but this man has a life and a work to go back. And I thought this was going to be about an hour, so she's given it a lot more time than I expected. Thanks a lot for that, Jeff.
Yeah.
Please don't cry, because I want to give you a proper goodbye after we cut the live feed.
All right, cool.
To all of you, thank you so much. To you, Jeff,
thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
And to all of you, tomorrow with us, Mr. Rafael Albuquerque. Stay safe. Use a fucking mask. If you don't, I know where you live and I'm going to kick your fucking ass. Wear a mask. Stay safe. Take care. Talk to you all tomorrow.